Hi everyone, Melissa here, and I'm a second grade teacher from Melbourne. Today I'll be discussing some assessment strategies that directly impact on students' teaching and learning experience. To help students develop and learn, using assessment strategies can be quite powerful and is quite a diverse tool that can help teachers understand where their students are at and tailoring their teaching approach accordingly. Today I'll be discussing some formative assessment strategies such as observation, questioning, and work samples, whilst outlining their key benefits and their effects on student learning in mathematics throughout the year, then recommend record keeping for each. I will also be focusing on a CD from the Number and Algebra strand of the Australian Curriculum of Mathematics to illustrate how the assessment strategy that we'll be discussing today will be applied to determine how students have achieved this Year 2 standard in mathematics. The first strategy I'm going to talk about is open-ended questions or questioning as a form of assessment in whole class teaching. To introduce the topic of number sequencing and patterning to students, I would use a hundreds chart and get the students to count with me. I would then ask them open-ended questions such as how did we get to 100 and can we get to 100 faster? What happens if we count by threes? When I get responses from students, I will then ask them to explain their answer and maybe perhaps see if anyone agrees with them. Open-ended questions are a type of formative assessment that actively involve the students and create open dialogue between my students and I. These type of questions encourage the students to think more deeply about the problem, and their responses give me a good idea of what they already know about number sequencing and patterning. It also helps me determine how I can refine my instructional teaching. The main benefit of using this assessment strategy is that it gives me instant feedback that I can use to inform and direct my lessons. It also encourages higher order thinking during whole class teaching. The downside, though, is it requires educators to have a lot of practice to be really proficient at asking good questions. It also is hard to record student responses, particularly during whole class lessons. If there is a lot of data that can be ascertained from the whole class discussion, it might be worth video recording or voice recording student responses that you could watch later on. This is good because it records the data that you're able to look back on and inform your upcoming lessons. The next strategy I'd like to discuss is observation. After the introductory activity, I get the students to pair up and complete the 100 chart jigsaw. While the students are undertaking this activity, it gives me the opportunity to make the assessment through observation. Observation is another form of a formative assessment where I can obtain evaluative information and see action and behaviours in its natural context. I can observe the conversations that are being had between the students and watch individual students as they carry out sequencing tasks. It's an excellent way of assessing their understanding, and it also gives me an opportunity to ask them open-ended questions. The main benefit of using this assessment strategy is that it's low impact and can be easily adapted for a wide range of situations. The downside, though, is that no teacher can observe every student every lesson. It may take a few weeks to gather all of the data. It can also be unreliable and biased if your observations is not carefully planned or if the key criteria is not identified early. It's important to be systematic and to record the observation of each student. I would recommend keeping a clipboard or a notebook where you can easily record your observations, using color coding to help organize your notes, and having a page for each student or a page for each subject. Finally, the last strategy I'd like to discuss is work sample assessment. At the end of the lesson and after completing the jigsaw activity, for example, students can do a page in their maths workbooks to reinforce what they've learned from the lesson. Or if I feel that students have mastered the task, pose more challenging questions or challenging worksheets to extend their knowledge. Maths workbooks usually contain different sections that focus on each strand and achievement standards outlined in the Australian Curriculum of Mathematics. By regularly collecting, recording and marking these work samples, it provides me with valuable information. The advantages of using this assessment method is that it gives me information about what the students are struggling with, if there are any common misconceptions about the task, and overall whole class understanding. Once all the data has been collected, I would use a scoring scale that looks to analyse student understanding, working out an answer, focusing on more than the correct answer but their progress. For example, from the scoring scale on the side, it can be deduced that looking at the scoring scale that perhaps Jake did not show as much working out and that he displayed little understanding around the topic. To conclude, I'd really like to emphasise that some of the strategies that I've discussed today do not give a holistic assessment or should be used alone, but rather highlight the importance of varied assessment strategies, particularly in mathematics, to showcase student progression. In the 21st century, we now understand that this is more about student progression rather than the final outcome, that can really help and support student learning. And as educators, we need to use appropriate and varied assessment strategies to provide valuable data to make informed judgments about the success of our class meeting the standard criteria mentioned earlier. Thank you.